Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about chapter 8, which is nutrition basics, and I'm going to cover multiple different things within this video to make sure that we're fully knowledgeable and aware of nutrition basics. And I'm going to go a little bit further in detail than your textbook might and try to break it down in more simplistic terms so it's easier to understand. So first of all, we have multiple different things that make up what we call nutrients. And those nutrients are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Now we have two different categories. One is macronutrients and one is micronutrients. Macronutrients consist of carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Now, carbohydrates are what we consider to be energy for the body. It also helps regulate glucose and cholesterol, and it should be about 45 to 65% of our total caloric intake per day. So carbohydrates are extremely important for our diet. And I really deter students and individuals from perceiving carbohydrates to be bad and for them to cut that piece of their diet out completely, because when you do that, you don't have an energy source. So then what happens is your body pulls from its fat system, which isn't entirely bad. That's actually really good if you're extremely overweight and you're trying to lose weight really fast and you're trying to dip into that fat source to be able to lose body fat. However, I don't recommend that people do this regularly, and I don't recommend for people to do this if you're not extremely overweight. There's only one reason that you should be drawing from your fat source, and that's simply if you are extremely overweight and you need to tap into that fat source. Otherwise, we need carbohydrates throughout our day for our energy source. Carbohydrates are what switch to glucose. It's what gives us energy to get up out of bed. It's what gives us the energy to sustain throughout the day. It's not just about exercise. It's not just about those things, but it really and truly is our source of energy for daily living. Um, and carbohydrates also help regulate different systems, and it helps do different things within our body that help us live and function. So we can have anywhere between 45 to 65% of our caloric intake be carbohydrates. If you're not very active, that should be on the lower end of the scale. If you are active, it should be on the higher end of the scale. So we have two different types of carbohydrates. You have simple carbohydrates and you have complex carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are one or two molecules of sugar, which naturally occur, whereas complex are larger molecule strands found in fiber and starches like legumes, vegetables, grains, whole grains, things of that nature. So you have those two simple versions in carbohydrates. So the way that works is carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which I've already said before. So really how we use carbohydrates for energy is carbohydrates are transferred and converted into glucose. Then glucose is readily used as an energy source throughout our body. When the glucose is not used, it's immediately stored within our liver and our skeletal muscles as glycogen. And then if there is not enough storage capacity within our muscles and our liver, that glycogen is stored differently. So when glucose is not immediately used and it's not able to be stored, it's actually stored in lipid panels. So in fat enabled lipid panels, which then creates that subcutaneous fat and body fat that we don't want. So when we're constantly exceeding our caloric intake and it's not matching our energy expenditure, then we're storing that as fat within our lipid panels, and that's not what we want to happen. So then we have our second macronutrient, which is protein. And protein helps with repair and growth of muscles as well as bone. And protein is essential to living. It is so essential to our daily function. We have to have it to regenerate cells. We have to have it for restoration of cells. When you have surgery, when you have any type of major thing going on, protein is the number one thing that you should be consuming before and after your surgery. So, especially if you're having a baby, it's highly recommended that after you have your baby, you have like a protein shake, you have some sort of protein meal for you to be able to regenerate those cells that you just lost or you potentially ripped. Hopefully not, but you should have protein on hand. So we have two different types of protein. We have complete and we have incomplete protein. Complete protein is all amino acids are in one, and that's typically found in your animal and soy products. Then you have incomplete, which is food or products that lack one or more amino acids, which typically is plant-based protein, with the exception of soy. So soy does have all the complete amino acids. So I want to make note that you need to be aware that complete proteins are unhealthy sometimes, as they have saturated fats as well as calories, whereas the incomplete proteins typically have no saturated fat and can be much healthier for you. So just keep that in mind. Our protein intake should also be anywhere between 20 and 30% of our caloric intake as well. So we need to be consuming a pretty good amount of protein throughout our day. To make that more specific, we should be consuming 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So say you weigh 150 times 0.36, that's how much protein in grams that you should be consuming per day. Not calories, but grams. And grams are actually the more stable way for you to calculate how much you're eating throughout the day versus calories. So we should be consuming X amount of grams, and that's really the more reliable way to lose weight when we're talking about weight loss versus calories. Although calories are very important, we should be more consumed with the grams that we should be consuming per day versus calories. Then we have fat, which is your third macronutrient. Fat helps with cell integrity, cell reproduction, insulation, organ support. So fat is also extremely important. We have multiple different types of fat. You have saturated fat, unsaturated fat, and trans fat. Most people understand what the differences between those are. So, saturated fats are the full carbon chain of hydrogen atoms, and they are solid at room temperature, typically things like animal products. Then you have unsaturated fatty acids, which are one or more carbon-carbon bonds, so they don't have the carbon-hydrogen bond. They have a carbon-carbon bond mixed into that chain versus a hydrogen-carbon, hydrogen-carbon. And these are liquid at room temperature, so things like olive oil, any type of oil. And then we have trans fat, which is the non-healthy fat. We really don't have a hydrogen and a carbon. It's more of a hydrogenation type of thing where you have hydrogen, you may have carbon mixed in. And these are the not healthy type of acids that we want to avoid. So in talking about fat, it's also very important for us to talk about cholesterol. So we have low density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is your LDL. You will hear LDL and HDL in differentiation. So LDL is the fat that carries cholesterol or fatty acids from the liver to the rest of the body. If you have high levels of LDL, it's a sign of heart disease. So if you have LDL, that's the bad fat, and you want to really reduce that because the cholesterol is being taken throughout the rest of the body. So it's then carried to your heart and various things like that, which could lead to a heart attack, a stroke, a blood clot, all kinds of things. Then we have high density lipoprotein, which is your HDL. This is your good fat. It carries cholesterol from the body back to the liver, which eliminates cholesterol. So HDL actually clears out that cholesterol, and that's the number that you want to see higher if you're going to see a higher number in your cholesterol, not LDL. So LDL is bad, HDL is good. So water is also part of our macronutrient discussion. Water is extremely important in our body. We're made up of 80% water. It helps with digestion, it helps with hunger control, it helps with temperature control, it helps with blood markers. So our blood is mainly made up of water. So that's a very important piece of our body. It also helps with lubrication throughout our body as well as cushion. So it's important for us to be well hydrated, and you know if you're not hydrated. You feel it, and your body lets you know as well. So again, you should be drinking half of your body weight in ounces of water. Just for clarification, because I think this seemed to be a little fuzzy to some people, if I weigh 130 pounds, then I'm going to drink roughly 65 ounces of water. So you're dividing your weight in half, and that's how many ounces of water you should be drinking every day. So the 8 glasses of water, really not very realistic. You should be putting back in your body about half of that body weight in terms of water. Then we have vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are the organic compound for normal functioning, and minerals are the inorganic compound, so neither provide a direct energy source. Vitamins are water soluble and fat soluble. You can read that through your PowerPoint. There are multiple different types of minerals, which I'm really not going to get into the nitty gritty of that. It gets pretty complex and into the weeds. If you have questions about some minerals, let me know, and I'm happy to answer some of those questions for you. And then RDA stands for Recommended Dietary Allowance, which is a standard for dietary intake and macronutrients. That's typically the standard for all people, as 97% meet that criteria. And then food labels, make sure you're looking at added sugars, you're looking at the actual ingredient list, and you're looking at trans fat. So I can't convey this enough to you guys of look at the ingredient list. Look and see what they're putting in that product. And if you have over 10 ingredients in that product, it's highly processed. You really want to look for things that have maybe 5 or less ingredients, 6 or less ingredients, and it's going to tell you that it's less processed. And it's going to show you exactly what's in that ingredient. And you're going to be really surprised at some of the things that are that's in the product that you're trying to buy. And you're going to be really surprised by how many of those ingredients are sugar and how many that different words there are for sugar that they're just not putting out there, that they hide within that ingredient list. It's astounding. I also kind of want to take this opportunity to be more intentional about dietary intake requirements. So I really want to go over this a little bit more. So your carbohydrates, again, 45 to 65%. Fat can be 20 to 30%. Protein can be, I think it's like 10 to 20%. It really just depends on how active you are and what type of goal you have. So those are important to encounter. So carbohydrates, you should be consuming about 5 to 10 grams per kilogram of weight per day in carbohydrates, and you should be consuming 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight in protein. So again, 5 to 10 grams per kilogram, not pound, kilogram of body mass in carbohydrates, and 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight in protein. So those are your rough estimates, and I'll share this on Blackboard as well. You have a PowerPoint in there. So converting grams to protein, those are different things that you can look at, but you really want to focus on the grams. And just so you kind of have an idea of carbs, so bananas are carbs, whole grains are carbs, apples, grapes, things like that. It's just important for you to understand the differences in makeup and the carbs that you're eating. So when you're cutting out carbs, I always like to tell people that if you're cutting out donuts, great, that's processed. There's really nothing beneficial for you in that carb. If you're cutting out bananas and you're cutting out apples and you're cutting out fruit and whole grains, we have a problem. So those are going to provide minerals that you're not going to get anywhere else. You're going to get vitamins and minerals from apples, bananas, whole grains that you're not going to get in other places, and you may not get them out in other places as well as those natural products. So when you're thinking about cutting out carbs, you should really process cutting out processed carbs. So white bread, donuts, candy, whatever else you can think of. That's really just not very beneficial for you. Um, so again, in thinking about how and when you're eating that, so there should be pretty solid understanding of nutrition timing. So we need to be eating at least 3 meals a day, if not 5 meals a day. They need to be smaller, so that way you're boosting your metabolism. You should be eating before you exercise, whether it's something small. It shouldn't be anything big. It should be like a banana, a protein bar, or like a piece of toast. All of those things are quick energy because they're a quick whole carb, which will boost you through your workout, so you're not dipping into that fat burning zone, which is good, but you also don't want to burn your body out. So for the most part, those are the main things that I really wanted to convey. If you have more or you have other questions about nutrition, please don't hesitate to email me. This is a very big chapter that I really want you to understand. I really want you to grasp a little bit more. So the only other things that I want to say are for supplements that you could be taking, because supplements are also another question that gets brought up in this class quite a bit, is if you're vegan or you're vegetarian, you should be consuming a protein supplement of some sort, because your plant protein is not going to be equivalent to an animal product protein. So you should be consuming creatine or whey protein in some shape or form, or so make sure you're aware of that. Also, as we're in winter, it's important for you to know that if you're not getting a lot of sunlight and you're not drinking any type of vitamin D, then you should be taking a vitamin D supplement. Research shows that if you're low in vitamin D, which a vast majority of American adults are, then you have depressive symptoms, and sometimes regulating your vitamin D will help with your symptoms and depression. Not all the time. I'm not saying that's the cure to depression, but I am saying that there are some links out there. So please be sure that you're not deficient in vitamin D. And then make sure that you're taking your omega-3 fatty acids. It helps with cognitive functioning, processing, and it enhances your recovery and exercise. If you have other questions about supplements, vitamins, minerals, anything in general nutrition related, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I really want to address all of your questions, concerns, since we're not in the classroom. And I hope that this video was helpful for you in determining that. And I can't wait to read some of your work this week.